The moment you stop feeling. There comes a moment that slips in without drama, without announcement. You wake up one day and notice that everything that once brought you joy now feels distant, like echoes from a life you no longer recognize. The music that used to stir something in you now plays like background noise. Conversations seem forced, rehearsed, as if you already know how they'll end. Hobbies that once lit up your spirit now feel like obligations. Even the things that were supposed to bring pleasure, movies, travel, nights out, your favorite meals begin to taste bland, emotionally and spiritually. You don't feel broken. You don't feel depressed. But you don't feel much of anything at all. You begin to wonder what happened to the fire that once made you feel alive. And more hauntingly, you begin to wonder if this numbness is permanent. This moment, this strange emotional twilight, is more common than we like to admit. And yet, few people know what to make of it. We're conditioned to expect occasional sadness, seasonal blues, moments of stress or fatigue. But this is different. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It just lingers, quiet and still, like a fog that won't lift. At first, you try to ignore it. You blame it on lack of sleep or a busy schedule. You promise yourself a vacation will fix it, or a new project, or a new playlist. But nothing sticks. You keep waiting for the feeling to return, the sense of excitement, of wonder, of engagement. But all you feel is the absence of feeling. And beneath the surface, a question begins to take root. Is this all there is? For most people, this question never reaches full volume. It lives in the background like static, just loud enough to unsettle, never loud enough to demand transformation. But for those who stop and listen, this question can become a doorway. Not into despair, but into depth, into something more honest, more real. Because this moment, when nothing feels fun anymore, might not be the end of your joy, but the beginning of something else entirely. 2. Beyond the surface, what emptiness really means. Most people mistake this emptiness for boredom, or perhaps a sign that they need a break. They try to outrun it with distractions, scrolling endlessly, binge-watching shows, chasing novelty. They assume that if they just stay busy enough, the feeling will fade. But it doesn't. Because this isn't boredom. It's not exhaustion. It's not laziness. It's a signal. A message from a part of you that doesn't speak in words, but in silence. This is the language of the unconscious. Carl Jung, one of the great explorers of the human psyche, believed that when our lives lose meaning, when we feel emotionally flat and disconnected, it's not because something superficial has gone wrong. It's because something deeper is trying to get our attention. The psyche doesn't shout. It withdraws. It stops feeding energy into the things that no longer align with who we're becoming. That's why the hobbies you used to love suddenly feel empty. That's why relationships that once lit you up now feel draining. It's not because life has changed, but because you have changed and a deeper part of you is asking to be seen. Jung saw this emptiness not as a problem, but as an invitation, a threshold. It's the moment where the soul stops playing along with the roles it's been given and starts asking real questions. Questions like, who am I, really? What do I truly want? Not what I've been told I should want, but what I want. What parts of myself have I silenced in order to fit in, succeed, be liked, or feel safe? These are not casual questions. They're disruptive. They shake the foundation of a life built on autopilot. And that's precisely the point. Emptiness forces us to pause, to reevaluate, to listen, not to the world outside, but to the quiet voice within that's been waiting patiently to be heard. Because underneath the numbness isn't nothing. It's potential. It's the stirrings of something real trying to be born. But it can only emerge if we stop long enough to let it. 3. Society's trapped the illusion of a happy life. From the earliest moments of our lives, we are taught how to be happy. But it's not a happiness that grows from within. It's a version carefully constructed by culture, by media, by institutions, and often by the people who raised us. We're handed a checklist. Do well in school, get a respectable job, find a partner, make money, build a secure life. And if you do all these things, we're told, you will be fulfilled. You will matter. You will feel whole. But what if you do all of that and still feel empty? This is the secret that so many carry in silence. Outwardly, they appear successful. They've done everything right. They've played by the rules. And yet, they find themselves staring at the ceiling at night, wondering why nothing truly moves them anymore. Jung understood this dilemma well. He saw that modern society emphasizes conformity over authenticity. It teaches us to play roles to be the achiever, the caretaker, the provider, the performer. And in doing so, we lose touch with who we really are beneath those roles. The tragedy is not that these roles exist. It's that we start believing that they are all we are. Over time, we begin to live on autopilot, chasing goals that once excited us but now feel hollow. We keep moving forward because that's what we were taught to do. But eventually, the cracks begin to show. And when they do, we panic. We wonder what's wrong with us. We think we're ungrateful or broken. But we're not. What's broken is the story we were given about what makes life meaningful. Jung believed that true purpose cannot be handed to us by society. It must emerge from within. And often, it doesn't appear until the old framework collapses. That collapse, the moment when everything feels meaningless, is terrifying. But it's also essential, because it's in that void that the real questions begin to surface. Not what should I do to be happy, but what truly matters to me. Until we stop chasing society's idea of a good life, we'll never discover our own. And perhaps that's why everything feels so dull, because your soul is no longer willing to settle for a life that doesn't fit. 4. The call to individuation. What if the emptiness you feel is not a dead end, but a beginning? Not a failure to enjoy life, but a signal that the life you've built no longer matches who you're becoming? Carl Jung believed that every human being is born with an innate drive toward wholeness, a process he called individuation. It is the journey of becoming your true self, the unfolding of everything you are beneath the roles, expectations, and masks you've learned to wear. But this journey rarely begins in joy. It usually starts in crisis, in disconnection, in the deep and unsettling feeling that something is missing even when everything seems fine on the surface. That feeling is not random. It is the psyche's way of getting your attention. It's trying to tell you you've outgrown this version of your life. What once fit no longer does. The person you were no longer contains the person you are becoming. But instead of answering this call, most people resist it. They double down on their routines. They search for new pleasures, new achievements, new ways to stay busy. They treat the symptom boredom, restlessness, fatigue while ignoring the root, a disconnection from their inner world. Jung warned that this resistance comes at a cost. The more we avoid the call to individuation, the more lifeless we become. We lose access to our creativity, our intuition, our passion. We become spectators in our own lives, going through the motions, reacting instead of choosing, numbing instead of feeling. And yet, within the discomfort lies a choice. We can continue to chase the life we think we should want, or we can begin to ask what our soul truly longs for. But make no mistake, this path is not easy. Individuation is not about becoming better. It's about becoming real, and that requires facing everything you've avoided. The grief, the fear, the desires you buried to be accepted, the parts of yourself you exiled to survive. To become whole, you must stop trying to be perfect. You must let go of the life that no longer serves you, even if it once did. And you must begin walking a path where meaning is not prescribed, but discovered step by step, truth by truth, until you no longer live a life you were given, but a life you chose. 5. The fear of stillness, why we run from ourselves. If individuation begins with listening to the soul, why do so few of us ever hear it? The answer is simple, but not easy, because listening requires stillness. And stillness terrifies us. We live in a world built on speed, noise, and distraction. Silence is uncomfortable. Slowness feels wrong. When there is nothing to do, nothing to consume, nowhere to go, most people begin to unravel. Because in that silence, the inner voice they've spent years avoiding finally begins to speak. And it doesn't always whisper sweet things. It brings up the truth. It stirs the unresolved. It confronts you with everything you've buried, fears you denied, grief you ignored, longings you deemed unacceptable. No wonder we run. No wonder we cling to screens, social feeds, shopping carts, and schedules packed to the minute. Distraction is not just a habit. It's a defense, a way to keep ourselves from feeling what's really there. But Jung believed that without stillness, there can be no transformation. Because the psyche will not shout over your distractions. It will only speak when you're quiet enough to listen. And when you finally stop, really stop, you begin to notice things you never had space to feel. You might feel sadness or anger or confusion. You might realize that you're not living the life you want, or that you've compromised too much, or that you've never truly asked yourself who you are outside of what you do. These realizations hurt, but they are the beginning of healing. Most people mistake comfort for happiness. They think that as long as they're entertained, they're okay. But comfort can be a cage. It can keep you trapped in a life that looks fine but feels empty. Stillness breaks the illusion. It shows you what's real and what's not. And while it can be unsettling, it's also clarifying. Because once you see the truth, you can no longer unsee it. And that truth, however painful, is the first step toward a life that feels whole, not just busy. Stillness is not the enemy. It is the doorway. And the life you long for waits on the other side. 6. The identity crisis, losing who you were. There is a strange kind of grief that comes not from losing someone else, but from losing a version of yourself. It happens quietly. One day, you realize that you no longer relate to the things that used to define you. The goals that once drove you now seem irrelevant. The relationships that once felt essential no longer nourish you. Even your own reflection feels unfamiliar. You're not who you used to be, but you're not yet sure who you're becoming. This is the in-between space, the liminal zone, where the old self has fallen away but the new self has yet to emerge. Jung saw this state not as dysfunction, but as transition. He understood that transformation doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds slowly, through the shedding of layers, the disintegration of false identities, the painful release of narratives we've outgrown. And yet, this process is often misinterpreted. Society calls it a midlife crisis, or burnout, or depression. But what if it's not a breakdown? What if it's a breakthrough in disguise? The psyche does not evolve in straight lines. It evolves through rupture, chaos, and reassembly. The moment when you feel most lost may be the moment when your real self is preparing to be found. But this space is uncomfortable. We're conditioned to have answers, to project confidence, to keep moving. But identity loss demands pause. It asks us to let go before we know what comes next. That's frightening, because even if our old life no longer fits, it was familiar. And what lies ahead is uncertain. But just as a snake must shed its skin to grow, we too must release outdated versions of ourselves. And that release always feels like death before it feels like rebirth. In the quiet aftermath of losing who you were, there is a sacred invitation to ask without pretense who you are now. Not who you were taught to be. Not who others need you to be, but who you are beneath the conditioning, the roles, the survival strategies. That answer will not arrive all at once. It will come in fragments, in moments of recognition, in the quiet resonance of something that feels true. And those moments, however small, are the foundation of becoming whole. 7. What the soul longs for, reconnecting with aliveness. If losing who you were is the first part of the journey, then remembering what truly makes you feel alive is the next. And yet, this too is a process of rediscovery, not of adding more to your life, but of stripping away the noise until you can hear the quiet pulse of your own soul again. Many people confuse stimulation with aliveness. They seek constant novelty, chasing the next thrill, believing that excitement equals meaning. But there's a difference between being entertained and being engaged. True aliveness is not loud. It's not always thrilling. Sometimes it's a soft sense of connection, a moment where you feel fully present, deeply yourself, completely immersed in what you're doing. Jung believed that when people feel numb or disconnected, it's often because they've stopped being curious. They've stopped exploring. Life has become a routine of responsibilities and expectations, with little room for wonder. And without wonder, the spirit withers. Reconnecting with aliveness doesn't require a grand reinvention. It starts with small acts of presence, reading something that stirs your thinking, walking in silence and noticing what you feel, creating something not for perfection, but for expression, speaking honestly in a conversation where you'd normally hold back. These moments are not glamorous, but they are real. They are how the soul speaks. They are how the inner world begins to reawaken. The tragedy of modern life is that we are so overstimulated that we become underinspired. We confuse distraction with direction, and we mistake productivity for purpose. But your soul is not asking you to be more efficient. It's asking you to be more alive. And aliveness begins not when you have all the answers, but when you start asking better questions. What truly moves me? What makes me feel connected to something greater than myself? When do I feel most myself, even if no one else is watching? These are not just philosophical musings, they are guideposts. And following them, slowly and sincerely, leads you back to the essence of who you are. Because the goal is not to return to who you were, it's to arrive fully in who you're meant to become. 8. Rebuilding meaning from within. At the heart of Jung's philosophy is a quiet, revolutionary truth. Meaning is not something you find, it's something you build. Most people spend their lives searching for it out there in careers, relationships, possessions, accomplishments, believing that if they look hard enough, they'll eventually stumble upon the perfect life that will finally feel fulfilling. But the more they chase it, the more elusive it becomes. Because meaning isn't hiding, it's waiting. And it doesn't live outside of you, it lives in how you engage with what's already here. Meaning is not delivered by the world. It is created through how you show up to it. It's in the attention you bring, the presence you offer, the intention behind the smallest act. Washing dishes, writing a paragraph, speaking a truth you've long held back. These aren't just mundane moments, they're invitations. Every moment becomes meaningful when you meet it fully. But we live in a culture that glorifies outcomes. We're told that value lies in what things lead to, not in what they are. And so we skim the surface of our lives, always looking for the next thing, never sinking into the depth of the moment we're in. We wait for the big purpose to arrive, some clarity or passion that will rescue us from the monotony. But Jung warned against this fantasy. He believed that wholeness comes not from some grand revelation, but from conscious participation in the ordinary. When you approach life, not with the question, what can I get from this? But how can I meet this with presence? That's when the shift begins. That's when the fog starts to lift. That's when meaning begins to root itself not in fleeting excitement, but in quiet alignment. And here's the paradox. The more you stop trying to extract meaning from the world, the more it begins to reveal itself. Because meaning is not a reward for having it all figured out. It is the natural result of living with sincerity, courage, and depth. You don't need to know your entire path. You just need to take the next step with your whole self. And in doing so, the next piece of the puzzle begins to reveal itself not as an answer, but as an unfolding. Not as certainty, but as a kind of trust. 9. Embracing the shadow. What you avoid will save you. As you begin to rebuild meaning from within, something unexpected happens. Parts of yourself that have long been silent begin to stir. Not just the noble parts, your creativity, your curiosity, your compassion, but also the ones you've kept hidden. Your anger, your shame, your envy, your fear. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the collection of all the aspects of ourselves we've denied, rejected, or disowned. And here lies one of his most radical insights. What you avoid within yourself doesn't disappear. It waits. It lingers beneath the surface, influencing your choices, your reactions, your patterns, until you're ready to face it. Most people aren't. They prefer to stay in the light, to present the version of themselves that feels acceptable, admirable, in control. But the shadow doesn't care about your image. It cares about your wholeness. And it will continue to make itself known through discomfort, through sabotage, through the haunting feeling that something is missing until it's acknowledged. This is why so many people feel empty even when their lives appear full. Because they've buried vital parts of themselves in the name of being good or successful or lovable. But nothing buried stays buried forever. The path to meaning and aliveness requires integration. It means turning toward the very things you've spent years running from. The grief you never process. The rage you swallowed. The dreams you abandoned. The needs you were told were too much. This is not an act of indulgence. It is an act of reclamation. Because the energy you need to feel alive again is locked inside the very emotions you've suppressed. And when you begin to feel them, not drown in them, but honor them, they begin to soften. They begin to move. And in that movement, something shifts. You start to feel more whole. Not perfect. Not fixed. But real. Jung believed that true healing happens not by rising above our shadow, but by making space for it, by sitting with it, by learning from it. Because the parts of you that hurt the most often hold the key to your depth, your creativity, your power. What you avoid will continue to chase you, but what you turn toward, no matter how dark, can become your greatest ally. 10. The turning point, creating a life that feels alive. There comes a point when the numbness becomes too loud to ignore, when distractions lose their grip, when your old life begins to feel like someone else's story. And in that moment, you're left with a choice. Continue pretending, continue performing, continue searching for meaning in all the old places, or begin again. Begin not by fixing yourself, but by meeting yourself. Begin not by chasing a better version of your life, but by asking what a more honest version would look like. Jung never promised that this path would be easy. In fact, he warned that individuation, the journey toward wholeness, requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of illusion, of comfort, of certainty. But what you gain in return is priceless, a life that belongs to you. A life where you no longer measure your worth by how entertained you are, but by how present you've become. A life that no longer relies on external validation to feel meaningful, because it draws meaning from the depth of your own awareness. And know that life may not always be easy. It may be quieter, it may be slower, but it will be alive. And in that aliveness, you will rediscover wonder. Not the frantic excitement of novelty, but the steady pulse of being rooted in something real. You will stop asking, "What should I be doing?" and start asking, "What wants to come alive in me now?" And that shift, small as it may seem, will change everything. So if you're standing in the emptiness right now, if nothing feels fun, if nothing feels right, don't rush to escape it. Listen to it. Honor it. Because it may be the most honest part of you, finally asking to be heard. And if this journey resonates with you, if something in you stirred as you listened, know this, you're not alone. Many are awakening to the same quiet truth. And the more we speak it, the less lost we all feel. So if you found value in this exploration, take a moment to share it. Leave a comment with your thoughts, your story, your turning point. And if you want to walk this path more deeply, subscribe for more insights that illuminate the inner life. Because the most meaningful journey you'll ever take doesn't start out there. It starts within.